Hello, and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we continue a retrospective we're calling Dead Writers Writing with the 1970 film Web of the Spider. This is episode 321. And actually, as Drew will point out, this is actually almost like a mini retrospective inside that retrospective. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, the lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, currently published by Comixology. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Also this week known as John Waters' mustache, Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes, yes, the Dracula Edgar Allan Poe. And finally, also in Denver, from the exciting downtown Littleton offices of Guzman Immigration, color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver.
Hello.
Oh, so you caught that too, Julia.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just laughing about the whole thing.
They're not technically in downtown Littleton. I'm sorry, you're not technically.
Oh no, it's just the two different
names,
pronunciations.
Two different pronunciations. Yeah, pronunciation. yeah.
In one, which somebody pointed out for the book that we should have had a comparison chart
of how many different ways I have of pronouncing Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Somehow I have like 9 different ways of saying that. And that's to my.
It needs to be like a Ricardo Montalban or some kind of like Guzman.
Guzman.
Like it's really long. Guzman. Like a villain.
According to my late grandmother, I'm like distantly related to Ricardo Montalban, so that'd be awesome.
Oh, nice. Really?
But yeah, wow. You need to introduce it as like how a villain would do it sometime like that. That'd be amazing.
Yes.
That would add extra.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. This movie is Web of the Spider. It is a 1971 horror film directed by Antonio Margheriti. The film is about, tell me if you have like some kind of whiplash or deja vu. The film is about writer Alan Foster, played by Anthony Franciosa, who accepts a bet from Edgar Allan Poe and his buddy Thomas Blackwood to stay the night in Blackwood's castle. At the castle, Foster meets Blackwood's sister Elisabeth and Julia, and Foster has sex with Elisabeth and wakes up to find that she was stabbed by someone whose body vanishes, allowing Foster to realize the house is possessed by ghosts. Yes, Web of the Spider is a color remake of Margheriti's own earlier film, Castle of Blood. I don't think we've ever done anything like this before. This is episode 321. I'd like to get opening thoughts. Let's go Drew, Tony, Julia, and then I'll go. And Drew, you can even kind of kick off with what makes this weird and special, because this is a very unusual choice for us. Take it away.
First of all, I mean, we're doing a remake of a movie like back to back, which we've talked about doing before, but we've never done until now. But this is a particularly weird remake because it's the same filmmaker. It's not even that far apart between this and the original.
It's like 6
movie.
years.
Yeah. And which, I mean, I guess nowadays in our Spider-Man reboot obsessed culture doesn't seem that out of line, but certainly back when this was done, it was a little unusual. And I think this isn't going to be an interesting topic just because like the differences are so subtle. Like like obviously there's the aesthetic differences going from like a black and white movie to a color movie, and a 60s movie to a 70s movie. But like they are just really close to each other. The stuff that I thought was interesting, the things that really stood out to me, in particular, Klaus Kinski plays Poe as a much more kind of aggressively drunk weirdo than the prior Edgar Allan Poe, and the lead right until like the end of the movie plays it very demurely, like the other guy was like a walking hard on the whole time. This guy, which is strange because this is the 70s version, so you'd think it would almost be sleazier. but this guy is much more subdued in his attraction to Elisabeth, and I thought that was, it was interesting to watch. But they are really, really close to one another, and man, I am wondering how everybody else took to that, because at times it really does feel like you're watching the same movie, only colorized. Like one of those, the closest two things that I think I could compare this to is if you watch the Lugosi Dracula versus the Spanish Dracula, or weirdly Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, the Twilight Zone episode, versus Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, the the movie version, which is of course also very close to each other, but with like small differences. And I those are the only other two things that I've ever watched that immediately come to mind, which are this close to each other, which is kind of fascinating. But that's all I got for now. I'm sure we'll dig into some more stuff once we get to it.
That's great. I'm excited because this is such a weird. It's such a weird choice. Tony, what are your thoughts?
I liked this, and it was interesting to watch. But I'll have to admit, I don't know if it's because we just saw the black and white one, and I just like that. But for something about this one didn't have the same magic. Mm-hmm. And I think part of it's casting, and I don't think anybody's bad. Like, I don't, not to disparage the cast at all, but there's something about the change and the look and feel of the casting that changes within 6 years, and the way that it's moving into the 70s here, that I didn't quite enjoy as much, even though the movie is basically the same. And you'll see this too with some TV movies will sometimes, or there'll be, was it a mini series that got turned? Every once in a while, you would see a mini series or something turned into a TV show, and then by the time you got to the TV show, you swapped out cast members.
Absolutely,
those are stars for the mini series, and then or pilot. And it has that kind of feel. I think Klaus Kinski, of course, just ripping and tearing through stuff is pretty great.
Yeah.
Although watching this back through, it also missed some of the subtleties and interesting things that they had done, probably because of the budget and the restraint of the budget at the time of the original. And I think that tone, it felt tonally more interesting to me. But again, that could be just me watching the first one and going, oh, I like that. But also call to like Blackwood, it made me think even more, and we can get into this later. He's even more of a jerk, I realized, for reasons we can talk about. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, wow, what? The fact he subjects people to this and has no qualms about it. And he doesn't have to live there, right? Like, he's just doing this
because he's feeding it
his
like
own evil obligation.
It's just an evil thing that he feeds, which is crazy.
The unhinged Poe in this is great. Klaus Kinski's great. So it's really interesting to see that, especially with the very 70s genre specific way that the intro sequence is filmed. That really kinetic, definitely hand cam kind of moving, the way it moves and the urgency of it. We've seen so many, especially like going to Weird Wednesdays, you and I.
Oh yes.
Like there's something about that. And that's something I haven't really seen. People have kind of tried that, but they usually lean more towards Blair Witch in execution, and less this really specific, if in my mind, kinetic way of moving the camera and featuring the actors and stuff that firmly cements it in the 70s horror genre for me, or thriller,
particularly Euro horror.
Yes, exactly.
Particularly Italian and Spanish. That's absolutely right. Yes,
and it can cause some anxiety, like I get, and it creates a sense of unease in addition to the subject matter, and I find that fascinating. But yeah, I mean, I like this. But again, like I said, it didn't have the magic. It felt a little like if you have your favorite restaurant and you can't go and you eat something that you really like, but it's not what you wanted exactly.
It's not the Kirby Lane on Kirby Lane. It's a Kirby Lane, somewhere else. Yes.
Right. And it's good, but I didn't enjoy it as much for several different reasons. I also think that the original, especially the women in the leads, in the original, there was something even more striking and interesting about that casting.
Yeah.
In my opinion, your mileage may vary. Again, I don't think anybody's terrible in this movie, and everybody looks great and looks the part. But back to back is where I kind of like, I think I lean towards the original.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Julia, I know that you had never seen the original before this, and now, I mean, and it's weird to imagine that there's now, we've defined a mini genre of Castle of Blood, movies, a mini genre made up of 2 films. where Edgar Allan Poe is making dangerous bets with writers. So what are your opening thoughts?
Well, as usual, Tony comes down on the kindness spectrum or whatever. I don't know how to put that, but he's always wants to say, hey, everybody did a good job, and it's not that I hate it. I hated it. I'm not going to be as nice as Tony was.
I mean, that's valid.
Okay. It's valid.
So
totally.
bored.
Tell us how you really feel.
Right, exactly. No, I was so bored, and I was like, and it's not, I wouldn't have hated it if I hadn't seen the one from last week. I just really hated seeing this version because I was like, I don't understand why they remade it. It was perfectly fine, and it was actually better. Like, the original was better. And so what was the point? Like, what was the point? They didn't change anything except just, like you say, colorized it. And it's not, there's nothing about it that's better. Like, there wasn't anything. So I was kind of irritated the whole movie. I was clawing my eyes out a little bit. I was just like, oh my God, just be over. So that, like I say, if I had never seen the original one that we watched last week, maybe I would have enjoyed it. But I just was like, this is exactly the same movie, but this is not as good. This is not as good. The only thing I liked better about this film was the fact that when he is and I'm skipping to the very end here for this, is that when he's trying to get Elisabeth to come with him, she, instead of turning into a pile of bones, she just fades away, which I think is what would have happened. I thought that was more believable. But everything else, I either thought it was the same or not as good. So, yeah. Sorry.
If
Sorry,
you may, the gate scene makes even less sense. We'll get into that later.
Yeah.
That got even more dumb, in my opinion.
For me, maybe it's because I didn't look at this as like I was watching this movie for entertainment. I looked at this almost like I'm watching this movie in a very, this is going to sound so hoity-toity, but like academic level. Yes. Like, I was like studying it because like I had watched the original, and now I was like, we have to play compare and contrast.
Yes.
And sort of like my enjoyment of it was sort of besides the point, because like I probably would not, I am with Tony and you, Julia, that I think the original is better. And if I had to watch one again for entertainment value, that's the one I would watch. But as a discussion piece, the two of these back to back make for a good it's a good experiment, as Jason keeps saying.
It reminds me of one experiment we did that was just like this. Was when we watched, it was I think Exorcist, the Exorcist The Return, I think it was called.
The two Exorcist prequels that were made basically simultaneously.
Well, they made it. They made an entire one, and then they shelved it, took the same script, gave it to a different director, and said, do it again. And they came out very different, much more different than this, by the way, but nevertheless, it's a very similar experiment. So my thoughts here, I actually, because I'm going to sprinkle my thoughts throughout, there's nothing I would add to all you guys said. Instead, I just wanted to focus on an interesting problem, which is, I agree with Tony that this one looks a lot more like what we think of as 70s Eurotrash. It's filmed in 1970, which is a mere 6 years after the release of the first version. But, already it looks a lot like, trashy Italian horror, except for that there's really no gore and no nudity. But other than that, it's got that vibrant color. The problem is the version that I have is one of the only ones that you can get in the United States. The one that's on Prime, it's pan and scan. You can tell that because it's been cut down for the dimensions of a television screen, and you can tell that an operator has inserted pans to be able to focus on whoever's talking at a given time. It's muddy, it's dark, it's reddish. In scenes that are already dark, like the one with Edgar Allan Poe running around with Klaus Kinski madly digging up a graveyard, it's so dark that you almost can't see it, which is greatly to the detriment of this film. Because I think if the film were clearer, that would probably be a little bit more inviting for all of us. Because a lot of times you're looking at it and it's very difficult to even work out what's going on in a dark scene, and that's a weird side effect of any time that you're watching a lot of Eurotrash. What's interesting, Tony, you mentioned though the just the texture of that opening scene. And to me, what I think is difficult for people to reproduce when they're trying to do an homage is, even setting aside the texture of the film itself, there's a grime somehow just in the whole composition that is difficult to reproduce.
Oh, yeah. Well, not only that, but throughout the film, people, I think you and Drew both mentioned that it's a more grimy film in general. Like set, like leading into the 70s, like filming in 70, whatever has happened in those 6 years. We've got it is closer to what we think of as, quote unquote Eurotrash, or it's grimier in, there's the sex may not be on screen, but you hear more of it. It's a more, not just because it's in color, but a lot of it is more lurid sexually. Even though they've changed, like the scene with Julia, that's not quite as explicit.
I think it's been deeply cut. I think we've lost.
You think we've lost like this?
I think there's probably the same lesbian assault scene.
Yeah, because there was a weird cut. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I felt, although I because of that, I did find this movie strangely to be, for me, like it's like a less lusty movie. The fact that like the Gardner character has a shirt on, and he's like a less
maybe, but I agree. I know where you're coming from, but the overall feel is a little more. This is the exact, like, it feels a little sleazier in some ways.
Yeah,
it's a little
trashier about the color,
and I don't think that's. I don't mean that to disparage it, but again, when they're having sex, you hear it in a very 70s sex scene way, and there's stuff
and
like
the guy
that
looks
throughout.
So 70s. Our hero.
Yeah,
what's
his
the character's
blazer,
name?
which is not Victorian at all. There's nothing Victorian.
By the end of the movie, he looks very contemporary. Like
but from the beginning. No, I told Jason, I was like, he reminds me of a cross between William Shatner and this guy who played this character on, back when I used to watch The Days of Our Lives. This character was called Don Craig, and I said, I'm going to look him up so you can see. And literally, the picture that they have in that came up first for Don Craig from Days of Our Lives, he looks exactly like this guy in that he has the same haircut, the same brown jacket, and the same black shirt. So it wasn't even just like how he looked; it was like his whole outfit.
Well,
you mentioned Shatner. Like, certainly by the end of the movie, where he's like mugging for the camera, a lot. Like he's definitely pulling some Shatner faces, but I don't know. Like, I just found like the first guy playing this part to be much more swaggery. Like, this guy to me seems much more reserved, and the way
I'm not talking about him in general, but the overall feel of the movie has a way more lurid feel, and not just because it's in color. It's got a little bit more grit on it. Whatever's changed in between that. I also, by the way, Julie, you mentioned that, but like, the brown that's in this movie, and there's a lot of it because the print is muddy, the one on Prime anyway, that is the 70s brown. Like, when you look at that, exactly. You go, oh, this is, there's refrigerators that color, and there's lots of clothes that color. Like that's going to become the brown that's in so many Sears catalogs.
Yeah.
So even though it's more like European, it's a little classier, probably much
And-
classier than Sears catalog at the time. But
And yet,
That-
I
that
do
is the
think
thing.
there is some parts of this movie that are prettier. In
Mhm.
particular, because it appears they have an actual castle, at least for parts of it. So you
Right.
see more of the castle. But like, there is one shot where like they're trying to make you think that Elisabeth is a painting. And it's
That's
not.
great.
That one is not in the original movie, or if it is,
No.
I
Mhm.
missed it. That shot is really amazing to me.
Yeah, it was
Like,
good.
Yeah.
That was
that's
really good. I
pretty.
agree.
It's
Yeah.
a great moment because it is disturbing because you can't quite. It's weird because he looks and he sees the sort of waving curtain and a woman standing behind it, or maybe she's a painting. That is good. That was just really good. Yeah. I speaking of the muddiness, and then I want to move on to a question at the top that Drew mentioned before. But speaking of the muddiness, I looked at the various different versions. So somebody had sort of listed the versions of this film that you can get, and the only two versions that are available in the United States. This one that's on Prime is the public domain version that's been in the public domain box from Brentwood BCI that you can get like at Best Buy and stuff like that. And I've had it for years, and it's exactly the same version. And then there's a German version that has more scenes and is anamorphic. So if you were to give this thing like the crown jewel release, you would probably want to go back and start with the damn German version and subtitle it maybe or whatever, because I think we are stuck with this TV version.
That's a shame too. And that's another thing I really, it's a shame that part of our discourse is unfortunately based on a flawed print.
Yes.
And, and this has been a thing that's, happened historically, right? Like, oh, I saw this version. And then years later, you go, this would have been so much better had I seen, the original or this restored version or whatever. And so that's a shame too, because we can only go off of what we,
right.
what our eyes, what's put in front of us.
Because you don't know what's like. You remember we were all amazed last week by that scene where Alan is running out and there's all these people hanging in the trees.
Right.
What's funny about that is I believe it was because of the poorness of the cuts of that movie that I'd seen in previous years. That it's so dark and muddy that those hanging figures were invisible. But that version we saw last week was restored.
They completely omitted that. I was very disappointed that they completely omitted that subplot.
Man, that was a bummer too, because it looks so great in the original. When he's running around outside this time, it just didn't have the same magic. But I would love to see the restored version, because you always hope, especially as a cinephile, as a person who enjoys the original intent of the director. I mean, now especially because this is the second original intent of this director. And so that's fascinating too, right? You're kind of going back to the well and messing with your own, here I would like to tweak this and tweak that. So you're getting what we can assume, not having read anything from the director on this. We're assuming this is stuff, hey, I wanted to fix this, or this is this vision I had when I got to go back and do it, which is fascinating to me.
The only answers I've seen online, and there might be more, there might be a book about Antonio Margheriti or his kind of school of Italian directors. But the reason given online was that the first movie, not enough people saw it, didn't do all that well, so he figured it was just ripe for redoing. Like, in other words, people haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And I've heard people say, hey, you got an old black and white movie, but the kids today, they won't watch it, so let's just remake it in color and they'll watch it. So, and further, he was disappointed. Looking back on it years after that, Margheriti said that it was a mistake, that you lost the atmosphere of the original.
Yeah.
At least we agree.
We're in agreement. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry. It kind of reminds me of, there's a couple of bands that I like that have went back and remastered. And in some cases, the remaster also includes some re-recording of stuff. And some of it's nostalgia, because that's what you grew up with and you listen to over and over and over. And some of it's just, you know what? I don't think you should have monkeyed with that, because just doesn't have the same flavor. There's two bands in particular. I'm not going to mention it because it's kind of weird for me to, like, being in a band, whatever, that's your vision, but there's a couple where I just didn't buy the remasters, and I think I bought one remaster of one band and was like, no, that's enough. Unfortunately, one of the bigger bands, they're on Amazon Prime, all you can get is the remasters, and every time I listen to it, I think I just eventually deleted them because I didn't like those remasters enough. And this, that's a thing that can happen. Somebody goes, I hated that mix or whatever.
Mhm.
But that's also subjective, even though that may not have been your original intent.
Boy, good. It's so funny. You think about like this is probably not going to be an artist who's particularly exciting to you, but Chris Rea, who's a Welsh guitarist, right? So came from Roxy Music originally. He had a hit in the United States with he released an album in '88 called New Light Through Old Windows, and he had some minor hits with it, like On the Beach and some other stuff. What was interesting about it is that all of the songs from New Light Through Old Windows were re-records under a new label that he had a better deal with. So,
that's something you have to do a lot of time. More and more artists who got stuck with shitty deals had to do that.
And that's why on YouTube or on Spotify, if you're doing like YouTube has its music subscription service, which I do, or Spotify, which is the same thing, really.
Sure.
You look to listen to the version that you love, and and so if the first version that you heard and that you really like latched onto was a re-record, and that's great. But I mean, I grapple with this all the time because I'm like, clearly, the guy didn't re-record, like if it's a recent re-record of something he did in the 70s, the guy didn't do the new version just for his own, just because he enjoyed it. It's probably because he's probably getting more money off of the new one. But you often don't like the new one as much, especially when they do crap like they remix it and they add gated reverb or something like that, and like this does not sound like the recording I had.
There's a particular. The one in particular is this one of the bigger metal bands. Just like all of their music got remastered.
Yeah.
In the mid 2010s, and I can't do it.
Right.
I don't think it's better. But again, who am I to argue? I mean, evidently was their new intent, but that doesn't mean as a listener that I have to dig on it.
Yeah.
So now I have to find if I want to
field.
Yeah.
I wanted, so Drew, you brought up beforehand the question of, and I thought this, as we look at Web of the Spider, which is clearly a remake and one of the most unique remakes we've ever seen. Just like we saw the new Salem's Lot versus the old Salem's Lot, and certain scenes have got to be in there, like the kid hanging in the window. What makes, is this your question? What makes a good remake?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, remakes are something that gets debated a lot in like the film geek community. And, there's some people that are just completely opposed to them altogether. But generally, there's a lot like, what is a good remake? And of course, the first thing, no pun intended, everybody always brings up is the John Carpenter version of The Thing, which is, of course, a classic in its own right. It's a classic independent of the Hawks version of The Thing. But I think for me, and this is probably where this movie has some failings. For me, when I watch a remake, I don't want a slavish retread. Like, this movie is different from the original movie, but it's not different enough. Like, right. A while back we were talking about the Blob, and we talked about the 80s version of the Blob and the original version of the Blob, and I think the 80s version of a Blob is a pretty good example of what I think of when I would say this is a remake that works for me, because it's very respectful of the original. Like, it doesn't, like, I don't like watching a remake and when you can tell that the filmmaker's coming at it from a, like, oh, I can improve on this old time piece of crap. Like I don't like a remake made from a point of condescension, but at the same time, I still want to be surprised. I still want, an interesting new take on the material. And that's probably, and maybe it's because it is the exact same filmmaker. So like they were too close to it to bring anything new to the table. But that's probably where this fails for me. But I don't know. Maybe this is how, the rest of you, if asked that same question, what makes a good remake, your answer is slightly different. But for me, this didn't entirely work.
Boy. Is a good remake a remake that improves on the original? Go ahead, Tony.
I'm with you, though. Like, I think you can do a lot of things, because one thing that I think good remakes do is perhaps update context, but not so much in a way that feels like that old stuff was old and crappy. I agree with you. And I've seen too many things where people go, well, my version's this because it's so much better.
Right.
But I think you can also, I think part of it is attempting to make something, if there's something that doesn't quite work, and there can be any number of things that can lead to that. I think we've all seen movies where you go, I would love to see a remake that fixes this. And not that it needs to be fixed. Like, it absolutely has to be fixed. But sometimes it just doesn't gel properly. And so some of the better remakes take those things. Like The Blob is recontextualized to that 80s feel.
Yeah, that's
and
super
it works
different
because of that. And the heroism, the Night of the Living Dead remake is a great recontext of those same themes.
What's interesting about that Night of the Living Dead remake from Savini is that Tom Savini does a feminist improvement on the original.
Yeah, and I think those things work the
aggressively.
Best.
I mean, and it's really strong. Yeah.
Well,
and I think that's some of the stuff that makes
Romero is still involved, so I guess that proves that you can have an original creator, because he was one of the screenwriters on that. But
but it's easy to, I don't know, it's hard because it's easy to miss the mark too. Like, one of my least favorites has to be the remake of The Haunting, which I think just has some great set pieces and some awesome actors and actresses. Like, the cast is awesome, but it's weird because it seems to fail to keep the core elements that made the original so creepy and effective.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think it's replaced with weird CG stuff, and it just it's one of those where somebody decided, like, no, the improvement will be all this extra stuff that it didn't need. And I that's where I don't enjoy it. And I think, again, it goes back to what Drew's saying. Like, you see certain ones and there seems to be a contempt for the source material, or that's so old and stupid, I don't really want to do that. I think my version is going to be the definitive one, and I dislike that.
Do you think that boy, there's so much to do here. I mean, because, for instance, to me, the unforgivable thing about the new Haunting was just that it didn't have, it felt, I had no memory of atmosphere in that film at all. It felt very sort of,
which is
sort
crazy.
of matter of fact.
When you say that, it's crazy that you say that, because it has some amazing set pieces in it.
Mm-hmm.
The look of it.
Oh, yes.
But what's crazy is you say this. I agree with you about the lack of atmosphere in the same way.
Yeah.
There's an atmospheric quality to the original that, despite having amazing set dressing, locations, that giant fireplace thing is crazy cool. Like, all of that stuff looks great, film's great, would be interesting outside of the fact that you look at it and go, this doesn't have the feel that I enjoy. And it's a shame because, again, it's everybody in it is actually really good. You see them in all kinds of movies, and they're great in all of those movies.
No, absolutely. Lily Taylor is always wonderful, and yeah, right.
But something about it just doesn't have that same magic, and I think that's what I see here.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
There is the argument, and this is a film that I like, and when we covered it in the Kong retrospective, I defended it a lot. But there are those that will argue that a remake can be too reverent of the original. And the example that everybody always brings up is the Peter Jackson King Kong, which is almost like Kong continuity porn. Like, it's like how much King Kong fanboyism can you get into one movie, to the point where it's the original movie plus all this like hours upon hours of extra stuff,
Right.
and
I mean, think about the fact that like that's exactly what happened with Stephen King's own The Stand, which was like, let's take a version of the novel that's not very faithful to the novel, but is very, very good, and let's make a movie that's 3 times longer on television that's much closer to the and that's an interesting experiment in a remake, by the way, where you're just like, well, this one, it has different story beats, so that only occasionally do you see the 2 parallel lines of the film version and the TV version occasionally converge, like, the psychic conversation in the kitchen and stuff like that. I mean, the question about remakes is like, why? I guess the question is, why do you want to do it? Thing. But go ahead, Joy. I think you're going to say something.
I get the why. I get that it's, we want to introduce this material to a new audience who doesn't necessarily watch black and white films. But I do feel like you have to improve on it if you're going to do that. It just has to, or do something different, like not do a shot for shot. It's like you said, just colorize it. I mean, colorize it and re-release it colorized like they did with Wizard of Oz, or not Wizard of Oz. What was it that they did that with? Where they re-released something.
Wizard of Oz.
It wasn't a Wizard of Oz because obviously that was.
Sure. I get it. Well, I mean, It's a Wonderful Life. Everything's been colorized at some point or another.
There's a couple things that they got like theatrical releases because.
By the way, I just want to mention there is, in fact, I apologize, on Amazon there is a Blu-ray on the US Amazon.com Blu-ray widescreen that you can order. So it appears to be I don't know how good the restored version is, but it's based on the German version.
Well, that's cool.
It might be worth looking at it just to see if we have a different opinion.
Yeah.
Because, if they've cut a lot of stuff that would have made it more coherent or something. I don't know. But anyway.
It's kind of a shame that
I
it's
want
not
more
on
Ghost Nookie, to say the least. I mean, this is clearly a 1970s television version that we watched.
Yeah, it's a shame that's not the one that's streaming anywhere that I could
Isn't that
find.
wild?
But but what I was gonna say, so then about the remakes is, you either have to improve on it or make it completely different. And and there are some things that, like, what are some remakes that we've reviewed? I'm blanking on what's.
Well, I mean, obviously Dracula has been made and remade. Clearly the 1979 Dracula with Frank Langella is a remake of the 1931.
We did Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
That's right.
Right.
Both versions. The 1979 Nosferatu is a remake of the silent Nosferatu.
But again, you're mentioning things that are like decades and decades apart, not just 6 years apart. So they have so many different things that they can do at that point.
So your question is, why did they make Spider-Man: Homecoming, to Drew's point, a mere like 6 years or something after?
Well, I personally, for me, the Spider-Man performances. The Spider-Man movies, actually any of the superhero films, the difference is always going to be the actor, the performance of the actor. And in this case, I just didn't feel like the main guy, is good enough to merit like just a really dynamic performance. Whereas when I see like I see oh my gosh, what's his name? The new Spider-Man, the newish Tom Holland. When I see Tom Holland, his performance is so different than the other two that I'm just like, I really enjoy it. I don't care that it's a remake because it's really fun. Or all the different Batman, versions. That's what makes it fun, is that you've got a completely different look if it's a different director. But here it's just not. I don't know. That's all for me.
I also feel that this actor, like the changing of actors, kind of, with the exception of Elisabeth and the Edgar Allan Poe character, these characters are kind of underwritten, and this remake kind of showcases that, whereas like the original, because maybe because it was black and white, it had that like old school charm about it. It was okay to kind of like coast on the fact that like, okay, you're watching this like ghost story. Whereas this, it did feel very, the meandering parts that
Yes.
are in the original film even more so here.
Yeah, because
like,
it doesn't have the black and white atmosphere to fall back on.
Yeah, when I remember in particular, when they went to like the flashback scene where he's watching the party, I started to tune out. I had to really make myself watch that part. Like I had to like there was several times like where like Jamie was like typing something. She was sitting next to me but not watching it, and I had to be like, okay, you're gonna have to like every little thing that was going on in our room.
She watched this movie with you? Jamie did?
She half watched it. She was working. So like she usually watches the movies we do with me. But this time she kind of half watched it. But the every little noise, every little thing in the room suddenly became like a massive distraction, including like wind that was outside of our window. Like it was really hard to get through that scene. And I remember, when we were talking about the first one, how I was like, I think that this would have been better as a short film. I really think that's true here. Like, even though there's some like beautiful, shots in this movie, I just don't think that there's enough here to prop up an hour and a half movie.
Agreed.
Like I would gladly watch an hour and a half of Klaus Kinski playing drunk, batshit crazy Edgar Allan Poe, though.
Absolutely.
Like,
I didn't care for that performance either. I actually was kind of annoyed by it. It was just so over the top.
Good.
He's so crazy.
The right kind of over the top for me.
No, I didn't care for it. I agree with you that like when he's stumbling around, when the guy's stumbling around, and what's the character's name? Our main character.
Alan.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. When Alan is stumbling around in the branches at the end, it looks so stupid. Whereas in the first one, it really looked kind of like it just feels like
creepy.
Julia, I know exactly what you're talking about. It felt very much directed as, so act afraid, and you're running through branches, and he grabs branches to look afraid and pulls them towards him and does all this
right.
That was weird.
Some of that though, like
to it.
Some of that though, I think it's like the shift in the way acting styles were starting to go, because like the 70s, you had like the emergence of like method acting, and I'm sorry, a lot of the times that ends up with some, I know it's like supposed to be more realistic, but sometimes it actually ends up creating some really cheese.
Well, this one, especially as melodramatic as the original, because the original has a lot of melodrama, that part in particular, I know exactly what Julia's talking about, because it took me out. It felt bizarre to me as well, because of how this actor is grabbing branches like, I am fighting this.
Yes.
And it felt like like on stage theater almost.
In broad daylight too.
Yeah.
Like, and I know it's supposed to be early morning, but like, and you were talking about the spikes on the gate, like the fact that like the spikes were so obvious. Like, why would
not only that, but they're bent upwards. Like,
yeah,
it would have
and
to like
so ridiculous
it doesn't stab
to
into
imagine.
him.
Yeah, the gate swinging back with the force that it did would be enough force to impale him. Like, there was just not. There's no way.
No, that is not. See, this is puppeteering basically with a gate as your puppet, and it's not well handled.
Well,
I have to say though, this guy,
because they're even the blades this time. I know it's whatever, it's horror, they make it work, but the blades this time are straight up. So like you could see like a Jason Voorhees or something, or like picking someone up and then slamming them down. It's like basically a meat hook.
Yeah,
right.
But when a meat hook is next to you, you have to be lifted and put on it, and that's how all these spikes
it
were.
Would need to whack him, and it would just whack him in the chin and knock him back. Yes,
all of that, and the fact that we lost the hangman, like that was so creepy and effective.
Oh, the hangmen were so creepy. You're right. Like, if you're gonna do a shot-for-shot remake, then actually do the stuff that's good about the first one.
Well, once again, I haven't seen the Blu-ray. I don't know if those images were deemed too disturbing for 1970s TV. I just don't know.
I think it's they completely omitted it, because the line where the doctor this is another thing. I would love to see the backstory of this doctor character as a metaphysical, parapsychologist, paranormal investigator, whatever, like him living within a haunted house and becoming a ghost himself. That would have been a cool movie.
Isn't he? He's like a character out of. He reminds me of Cain and Abel in House of Mystery, in DC.
He's a better character than our lead. That's I think the problem is that like you have these side characters like Poe and then that guy, and our lead is pretty dull. But he says in the original movie, he says only Lord Blackwood would be demented enough to send somebody here this weekend, because it's it's during the Hallowtide or whatever. And this time he says only Poe would be demented enough.
Isn't that interesting? What a strange thing to say.
I think it's because they had Kinski though, who was a fairly recognizable actor. So they wanted to really push that.
I just wanted to mention that I believe that what we were focusing on the end of the film and the performance of Anthony Franciosa, and I just have to say, through the first half to 3/4, I think Franciosa is a much better Alan.
I like him in the first.
I'm with
half.
you.
I would over in the first.
Because his readings are more natural. He really seems to like know what he's saying when he says these lines.
And the first version of this character, he seems like such a sleaze.
I didn't even get that much.
I think the guy in the first movie seems like a walking hard-on. Whereas this guy seems like he's sincerely enamored of Elisabeth. Like I buy a little bit more into the idea that like, okay, this is love at first sight in this version, and it's about the only thing that I think is better about this version. Pretty much everything else I think is better in the original one.
This actress playing Elisabeth is Michèle Mercier, and she is a lovely actress, and she acted in a hell of a lot of movies. But there's something bewitching about Barbara Steele. That is, and I think that Michèle Mercier may be more beautiful. I mean, she's gorgeous.
Yeah, she is. She's more beautiful, and then the other Julia from the first movie is more beautiful than the one in the movie that we're watching now.
I'm with you there.
That's really
and again, we judge like it's so. I feel so bad too. Like when I was watching and thinking stuff like that, because again, these are all attractive, good actors. But you're comparing and contrasting, and so you have your favorites. There's
I think Barbara Steele is just difficult to look away from. There's something really arresting about Barbara Steele.
There's a magnetism that people have, and that's why you put different people on screen. She has that. She has a look that is magnetic, and I think the actress who plays Julia in the original also has she fits that part, in my opinion, a little better. There's something about her and the way they've done her makeup and the way her presence as well that feels a bit more regal, and also slightly colder, which is necessary for how she approaches things.
She's like the best Morticia Addams we never got.
That's great. I appreciate that. But I think, and again, it's one of those things where you look and you go, well, there's nothing technically wrong with any of the casting in the new one, in my opinion, but it's that subtlety. And you have to do it 6 years later, right? You do what you need to do, and you make these choices, and they need to work with the movie you're creating. But it's wrong when in the aggregate? It's just tough in the aggregate when you as viewers, this is how you look at it.
There was a line that I thought was really interesting. This Elisabeth gives that fits into the theory that Karma Slater gives on the soul that is that the senses can live on the earth. And Elisabeth says a line that she didn't say in the older version, which was, "I only feel alive when I am loved." And I think
that is really good.
It's an amazing statement for a ghost to say.
They are a lot more vampire-y in this one. Even like there's even the scene where like one of them appears after out of some myth.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
that is actually nice. It also plays into one of my favorite theories of ghosts is the ghosts are the energy left behind when something either traumatic or there's a huge outpouring of energy that is so dramatic that it stays within our realm, and that it's this like, you know, battery basically, or a capacitor in a way, right?
Yeah.
So capacitor holds energy dangerously so. If you touch one the wrong way, you know, you can die from handling a capacitor the wrong way. And that theory I have always found, you know, truly interesting, especially when we have the, you know, the scientific theory of, you know, matter and energy can neither be created nor destroyed, so they pass through our realm in different ways. And I always liked that theory and found that fascinating. And so when you have especially when in haunted house things where you have the house is the battery or the storage for these capacitors, and even more so in this movie, in both movies, where they are physical and they are ghouls more in the first one and almost vampires secondarily, but they need this recharge every year, and they do pass each other. They can interact, but they're all outside of time as well.
Yes.
Like the viewing of the dance of the ball is both congruent and, you know, is parallel to Camus, you know, and everything going on there. And sometimes they're interacting and they have no recollection whatsoever that they know about the past.
Yeah.
And other times they can go, oh, here's what happened. You know, we're going to talk to you as a contemporary. And also,
I think the weirdness that you're
great.
talking about right now, Tony, is the thing that continues to draw me to this story, probably more the original than this one. But that weird mystery, that weird Twilight Zone loop-de-loop of time in this house that's the cool thing.
Because again, it's interesting, you know, in retrospect, it is very interesting that sometimes they can say they remember.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're merely viewing basically a hologram of what's happened.
Yes.
And other times, each of the characters goes, oh, well, you need to see this other part that I didn't know about when I was alive, and yet now I can go back in time and show you this other hologram of what the past was.
That reminds me of the Sixth Sense when the little girl shows him about how she was getting poisoned. Yeah.
Right.
So if you were to take this idea, which I have to say I haven't seen a lot of, I mean, you know, pieces of it, but the way it's presented here, where these ghosts move in and out of their levels of consciousness, how would you like? I kind of feel like that's ripe for reuse. I mean, I feel like you could do another one of these.
It happens a little bit in The Others.
Yes, it does.
You know, that has a kind of loopy layers, and, you know, not to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen the Others, I guess I should. Yeah. So I think by now, this is 2001. If you haven't seen it, I think you know at least some of the plot. I don't want to go
spoilers
into
for The
more.
Others. Skip forward like a minute or so if you don't want to know.
But it and I don't want to say too much more, but that is a movie that has parts that layer on top of each other in a similar fashion. When I think about
true.
You know, but it is very different. But
the other thing is there are no stakes. Like if you were to say, "Hey, I want to sell this as a movie," there's no stakes. The stakes are, will this guy live through the night and get $10? You know, and
$10.
I mean, you know, it's. So, and I guess to be honest with you, though, that's the truth in all ghost stories. It doesn't really matter. There's nothing if you don't survive the night, if you don't solve the mystery of this ghost. It's not like the president's going to die. There's no stakes at all.
In this version that he had survived, just so it would have been a little bit more different.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
you know, just think about that. He could have nearly made it out.
Yeah, because she goes, you have to get through the gates. And I'm thinking, don't stop at the gate, just keep going. So it would have been good if you would have kind of gone, okay, I got to get through the gate. Instead of just to the gate.
Well, it's just now occurred to me.
We're really like, you know, analyzing them because we watched them back to back. You know, it's not like I think there was a lot of people clamoring for a Castle of Blood remake. in like the early
right.
70s. This is something that the filmmaker wanted to do.
Yes.
Right.
Antonio
right.
Margheriti. Yeah. And by the way, this guy did a shitload of movies. I mean, Seven Deaths in the Cat's Eye, the great Giallo picture.
Oh yeah.
A lot of Italian stuff that wouldn't mean much to us, but a lot of like James Bond ripoffs and You're the Hunter from the Future and some Hercules movies.
One of the best, awesomely cheesy and memorable themes, the Yours World song from You're the Future, possibly better than the movie. Oh man, that is a classic. That is a movie that's perhaps the trailer might be better than the movie, but it's worth You're the Hunter from the Future is at least worth looking up the soundtrack because it is catchy.
Okay. He made a movie in 1982 called Hunters of the Golden Cobra. I don't know what the hell that is, but it sounds fantastic. Oh, apparently it is an Italian imitation of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
I'll watch that from this director. I'm all about if that shows up on TV or Prime.
Yeah.
Sign me up, man.
Hunters of the Golden Cobra, it's called. Yes.
I might have seen that actually, because I'm always looking for new oddball stuff. So I'm gonna.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, my endorsement when we get to it,
that sounds really
new oddball stuff.
Familiar, actually, really familiar.
So, all right. Well, I know that we've spent like an hour in this really fun. It's almost like a sequel to last week. In a sense, or a remake.
I mean, yeah,
We rebooted the podcast.
Yes, yeah, but I've really enjoyed it. I don't really feel like we need to talk about much more plot-wise because it's literally the same script. I did want to mention this. Did you guys notice these seem to be even the same needle drops? Like the music, I think, is the same music. That they've.
I wasn't thinking
used.
About that, but perhaps. Oh, but before we go, let me tell you, Blackwood. So it is interesting how they changed the dynamic of the honeymoon scene. And I thought that was an interesting twist because he changes that almost totally.
Yes.
There's none of the we're so enjoying, isn't it cool that we have this B&B that is our castle on our honeymoon? What a great thing. Instead you get this kind of role play, power dynamic thing that's again, it's really interesting and it kind of goes more into the way the 70s that feeling of sexuality and this, if that feels updated. But I thought that was a really interesting twist, but also it did reiterate Blackwood sent this honeymoon couple to their fucking doom.
Yeah.
What a jerk. You should totally stay at my place. You newlyweds? Oh, I have the perfect place. He knows.
Isn't that wild? He's he's a sadist, or this is like Audrey, where he's just got to feed this damn killer plant.
It's the family secret. You could extrapolate that if he doesn't do this, there's something that's going to happen to him, like a curse, or maybe not. He could just be a bastard.
What an ass! I mean,
but the fact that it's one thing to take ill-placed people and go, you should stay the night, and they kind of are fodder for this. But to go with a newlywed couple, let's see how this works out, because he knows they're gonna die. Nobody's made it out. He knows they're gonna die. Wow. In addition to the not so great, in fact, I think worst gate scene, except for the way the spikes are, it sort of makes a little tiny bit more sense. But the way they're placed is real dumb. It doesn't. I don't know. It just looked cool, right? You do some things if the spikes are like meat hooks, it look cool. But it doesn't make any sense.
And also the discovery of the guy, because the other one, I really liked that the Edgar Allan Poe character kind of goes, "Oh, that's great, he made it," because he's standing outside the gate, so it looks like he's just there. And then as they get closer, he's like, "Wait a minute." Whereas this one, it's immediately Poe's like, "What the hell?" I don't remember what he says exactly, but
because the guy is clearly hanging on a hook of sorts on
with the devil. I think he says.
Gate.
But exactly. Yeah, so I kind of like that because it was
I would have liked it if, since you've got Kinski, rewrite this scene so that the guy nearly makes it out, gets caught with some weeds that are attacking him, and have Poe come in and use his brandished cane to rescue him, and have Poe rescue Alan Foster, and they make it out. I would have been perfectly happy with that ending.
What would have, what almost, I mean, it would still be a trope and not make a ton of sense, but it would make more sense if the guy gets out, stumbles, and the gate falls on him with spikes.
Oh, yeah.
That would have
absolutely.
Yeah. Anything where you
sense.
either fall on the spike or the spike falls on you, but not where it bounces into you from just the regular pressure of the gate swinging. That was just stupid. Like you said, with a curved spike. It's all.
I don't know. I guess it's ghostly powerful, and that's why it works.
Yeah. Clearly it is. But if so, even like some sound effects or something to indicate that the house isn't going to let him escape, and so like a whistle or something that causes you to go, the house is acting up, and it's going to use the gate to smash him. That would have been fine. Because it would have told the story.
Of foreshadowing when in this version where he's walking through the first time, and like he sort of stops and looks at the spikes on it.
Yeah.
Which to me, again, going back to how I wish he would have lived, if I'm looking at this like gate, this ornate gate, and I'm thinking, wow, there sure are a lot of sharp, pointy spikes on this thing, I might not stand so close to it when I know I've been on the run from ghosts.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially, it's funny too, because maybe it's because I saw them back to back. And again, we're kind of analyzing this with that in mind, where, original viewers wouldn't have had that. If they even saw the first one, they've had a 6-year span to kind of think about
Forget
that.
what's
in a world where we didn't have cable, so it wasn't like it was on all the time. I felt like there was a lot less of, at any given time, gigantic guy with a knife is going to jump out and stab you. Like,
right, and the fact that
less urgency of that.
The fact that he didn't have, he wasn't shirtless with rippling muscles was disappointing.
Yeah. I'm certain.
I mean, that disappointed even me, because there's got to be something for like people who went to see studly dude, like most of the dude, like the hunky dude quote in this movie was like a big downgrade. Like the guys in the 60s version were much more handsome, and I say this is a comfortable heterosexual man. Like I feel like I can say that.
However, this version doubles down on off the chain beards.
Yeah, that's true.
Off the chain facial hair.
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of beards, so double point.
Yeah, well, I'm
that's
just saying,
I feel attacked all of a sudden now, Julia.
Well, luckily for Jamie, I won't be making any passes.
Right.
So one of the most uncomfortable things that I've experienced, and look, I have a pretty modest opinion of my own attractiveness, if I'm being completely straightforward about it. But one of the most awkward things that I've experienced since growing a beard is that all of a sudden, I don't know why, because I don't actually think I look that different, but all of a sudden, like, all of Jamie's friends are suddenly like, Jamie, Drew is so sexy now. Oh God, Jamie, there was like a point where she was on a Zoom call with a bunch of her friends from New York, and they're standing next to their husbands on their Zoom call. And one of her friends, who's like got her fiance right there with her, says, "Man, Jamie, Drew looks so good with that beard. You're lucky I didn't meet him first." And I'm like, your fiance's right there.
Look, take it where you can get it. I
like it. Yes.
It
just makes me feel uncomfortable and bashful.
I mean, I'm not as thin as I used to be. I never thought I looked super great. I have to pull off being a front man. I unfortunately wasn't during the 70s, where you could be a lot less attractive and be a front person. But that's something I think about. But also I'm completely clueless and stupid if people are making a pass at me usually. So, but I'm of the opinion, man, once you reach a certain age, just you're comfortably, you're happily married and comfortable and everything. Take it where you can get it. That's my opinion. But that is crazy. That is an interesting, hey man, run with it.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about the mop I suddenly have glued to my face that's radically.
I guarantee you, yours looks much more approachable and and attractive than this guy's beard, which is a weird yellow merkin that is just glued to his face.
It's
in
a
the
lot
most
of like
haphazard of senses. It's weird, and it does not look for a moment like a thing that would grow on a human's face.
Well, I think a lot of the beards in this, it's the 70s, and so crazy town beards were a thing. And then sometimes it looks a little bit like sculpture, and sometimes it feels like some of the stuff from Clash of the Titans.
Yes.
Release the Kraken.
Yes.
It's all over the map as far as that.
No, it's a terrible beard. I'm pretty sure that Anthony Franciosa is wearing a hairpiece, but it's a good one. It's a good hairpiece,
I have no idea. I mean, I don't know.
And Julia insists that Elisabeth is wearing a wig, which
Of course she's wearing a wig. That's the wiggiest wig that there ever wigged.
I don't know the first thing about wigs. I don't know how to judge whether a wig is a wig.
You look up wig in
It's just like a picture of this movie.
Jason, you watch a lot of costume dramas. I think you should step up your wig knowledge game.
I think so too, Jason. Like as much period stuff as you watch.
Yes,
I think perhaps
fair enough. Yeah,
maybe. Although maybe it'll I'll point out stuff, and Rain goes, "Why did you ruin that for me?"
Right.
It's so much better not knowing. So maybe you don't want to. Maybe being oblivious.
Maybe
being wig blind.
They have super long, voluptuous hair, and
you'll have to. Julie goes, "You have to excuse my husband. He's wig blind."
Can hair be? Is that a thing?
I don't know.
I've never heard hair described as voluptuous. That's a new one on
Sure.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, because you add, it has body, it has I don't even know what beside body.
All I'm saying is
be defined as voluptuous.
I am married to Jamie. And so I feel like I am an expert on things that are voluptuous. And
nice.
That's my politically correct way of saying it. And
yes, hair can be voluptuous because it's
okay.
It's thick. It has body.
I would go with volume.
Volume.
All right,
yes,
hair can be voluminous. This is very voluminous hair that Elisabeth has. We've definitely exhausted anything you could possibly discuss.
Apologies to the listeners who are still with us.
Yes.
And you have a new term, wig blind, so there you go.
We're going to really disappoint the person whose this is their favorite movie, and we did not go in depth enough. And they're like, how dare they say that Castle of Blood is better?
I mean, that's always my fear.
Boy, isn't it?
But
yeah.
I hope that people understand that we've watched these back to back.
Tony, this no one. I could be wrong, but this is anyone's favorite movie.
I don't know. Who am I to say? If it is,
how would you compare this? How would you compare this remake? This is so unusual on its own that it almost defies comparison. But I'm wondering how you would compare this remake to, say, the remake of, we watched the Carrie remake, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's we had that whole discussion. I'm still not clear if we decided this is a good remake or not. I think we decided this is a completely unnecessary remake.
I think it's unnecessary. Julia obviously thinks it's bad. I would say it's unnecessary, leaning into dull.
Right.
I mean, again, you're comparing. Well, I guess you said the director said eventually, maybe that wasn't. But at the time, he must have thought it was very necessary, or else he wouldn't have made it, right? So.
Yeah. At the time, he thought it was a good idea. Yes, absolutely. I mean, and it's also good to remember that Gus, let's see, was it Van Zandt? Anyway, they actually made a shot-for-shot remake of Psycho just to see if they could.
Well, that is a really, it's like 50
years later or something. It's not, 6 years later.
Yeah, you're right.
And it was a weird experiment.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Gus Van Zandt. Yes.
The one I want to see that I don't know why I haven't seen it. I think it's because it was a pain. Like, you have to watch it on Showtime. Is I really dig the movie In Order of Disappearance, and the same director and cinematographer remade it as Cold Pursuit with Liam Neeson, which
we saw. Yeah.
Have you seen In Order of Disappearance?
Oh,
Oh, you got to see the original. Also, there's a really cool trope in that I love.
Okay.
In fact, when I've watched In Order of Disappearance, and we were talking about there's probably going to remake this, right? Because it's not in English.
Yeah.
And I go, well, if they do it, it's got to be Liam Neeson, I'm pretty sure. And then lo and behold,
yeah.
not too long later, they announced, hey, Liam Neeson's going to be in Cold Pursuit. But I do need to see Cold Pursuit because I want to know again, it's the same director and cinematographer.
Yeah.
So, and I think I had some friends who worked on it in part.
That is a
level
very interesting phenomenon when a single director makes the same film once in his original language and comes, because they did that with The Vanishing, and it was, I believe, same director.
But if you at all enjoyed Cold Pursuit, which I haven't seen, I need to catch up on it.
Yeah.
I definitely wholeheartedly think you need to see In Order of Disappearance. There's some that was one of my favorites of that, whatever year it was, Fantastic Fest. Like, something about it just really worked for me, and I was a little, I guess disappointed is not the right word, but the fact that it has to be remade because people won't read subtitles,
absolutely,
that disappoints me a little bit. But again, hey, people want to see Liam Neeson, sure.
I have several feelings about that. I agree it's disappointing that people won't watch the original, but on the other hand, you employ a whole bunch of people again to do it again in English. The director gets paid again, and
sure.
What's crazy is, like, with The Vanishing and with that one, which I haven't seen the original yet, same director does it twice, and weirdly enough, it's his choices in the American version that people aren't crazy about, which is just so wild. It's it's
that's why I'm fascinated and I need to see it. But definitely, Jason, since you've seen Cold Pursuit, I'm pretty sure it's on Prime. Go watch In Order of Disappearance.
That's a good idea.
I think it was one of my favorites of that year. I've watched it a couple times since then, at least. I
appreciate that recommendation. I think that's a really good idea. So, yeah. In fact, let's get our final thoughts and let's come around for endorsements. So we went in the order: Drew, Tony, Julia, and then I'll go. So starting with Drew, what are your final thoughts on Web of the Spider? Called that for no reason I can determine.
This was an interesting few episodes. I don't know if I will ever watch this movie ever again. I often approach certain movies that we do from a completely analytical perspective, and this is one of them. I did greatly enjoy the conversation that we had about it, though, and I think that people, if you want to do the same experiment, I think people who are film buffs would get something out of it. I brought up the Browning Dracula versus the Spanish version of Dracula, and it's much the same kind of thing, where it's like you're getting a similar flavor but slightly different. Which isn't to say that this movie is nowhere near as good as the Spanish version of Dracula. So I have to stress that it's not in that caliber, but it's still an interesting back-to-back viewing.
What's weird when you say that, though, is I was talking to somebody over the past couple months where their opinion was that the English version of Dracula, Lugosi's Dracula, was somehow now like not cool anymore, and everybody's clamoring for the Spanish version, which I had no idea that was a thing that people were.
That there is some truth to that.
It's so weird to me because I do enjoy watching it recently. I found a lot that I really enjoyed, and I liked a lot of the choices. I thought some of the choices were better, but it's weird when I had somebody basically go, oh, they didn't even know my opinions, but they were basically telling like, oh, all the hip, wannabes are saying that now. That's BS. Lugosi's always the one. And I admire that, but I had no idea I fell into the this new hip crowd that I didn't even know I was a part of. That seems strange to me.
I honestly still prefer overall the Browning version, because I just think Lugosi is a special effect. You can't. This is actually going to kind of tie into my endorsement.
No, I gotcha.
Lugosi is a special effect that nothing can match. Like, he's just so great. But
yeah,
there's a lot that's great about the Spanish version of Dracula. It's bullshit that people are calling you like whatever, because like you're going to enjoy what you enjoy. But
I would just avoid those conversations.
I didn't. It was weird to me because I wasn't actually called out on that.
Yeah,
but somebody was basically relaying to me. I just didn't say anything.
Yes.
So here's the thing about that, though.
It was like the same thing that I had where somebody was like, "Oh, of course that person loves possession. That's the cool thing to do now." And I was like, "I like possession. Like I've been ever since I saw that in a theater in a revival. Well, I thought it was super cool. I have no idea I'm part of these movements of new that." People are like, "Oh, I'm already tired of people saying that the Spanish version's better." Like,
well, here's the thing. Here's the thing about that, Tony. While there is some truth in that, and like sort of like the hardcore horror, online fan base, most layman film fans are only aware of the Browning Lugosi film. Sure. there isn't a
it's
broad,
great.
but I'm saying there isn't like to say that like everybody shits on the Bela Lugosi version isn't exactly a fair thing to say, because like I think if you were to go up to somebody and go, "Hey, did you know there's a completely alternate Spanish version of the Universal Dracula?" I think the average person would be like, "What?" Because they're not obsessing over horror films the way we are.
Yeah. But I just found it funny for me, who I'm just to a fault. Warts and all, I'm me. Like in day to day, online, whatever. That I like what I like, and I love to talk about what I like. I love to shill for what I like, or at least be enthusiastic. Like I have no problem being enthusiastic, but sometimes you'll meet somebody who goes, "Oh, you like too much stuff," or "Oh, you're in that group," and I'm like, "I don't. What group? What are you talking about?" Like, wait, there's a bunch of people who think this. Okay, weird. This is how I've been since I formed this opinion. I didn't. There's certainly no. I don't know. I never seem to fit quite in with. Like I said before, I'm on the fringe of a lot of fringes, so it's fascinating to me to be part of a new, already looked down upon by certain more gatekeepery people. Yeah. It's just like I said, it's just fascinating to me. Like it's bizarre.
It's not a new I mean I've said this even before. It is weird how Bela Lugosi has become the underrated Dracula, I think. But I should actually save this stuff though because this really heavily ties into my endorsement. So I'm cutting off.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Tony, what are your final thoughts?
I like I said, I don't think this has quite the same magic, but I think also that could be partially because we watched them back to back. I might think differently if I had 6 years between the two. I do wish I had seen that Blu-ray version, because some of the judgments come from what may or may not be a flawed version of this presentation, at least. So, and that's unfortunate. I prefer the original, watching them back to back.
Yeah,
I think there are some interesting choices here in bits. There's some really evocative scenes where you can see the director going, no, this is how I envisioned it. I found something similar with it wasn't a remake, but the remastered version of Daughters of Darkness, the 4K one that just got, and seeing a Q&A where the director talked about what he changed color timing wise and why he made those choices and how involved he was with the restoration. And so seeing those things was really interesting. You can kind of see shades of that, except the new scenes. I like Klaus Kinski's performance in this, and I enjoy the slightly more lurid Euro trashness of it as a separate thing. But the vibe I prefer from the original. That would be my main thing. And again, now I need to see I need to check out the German version of this to really get it. If nothing else, just see it in an original format.
The ratio. What's the word I'm looking for? The aspect ratio.
Yeah. Not pan and scan, which is you can still. What's weird is you can still watch movies. It'll say like pan and scan, and that hurts my soul. The same way that when people leave on motion smoothing on their TV,
Yes.
Makes me seeing Indiana Jones look like a soap opera in a pizza place one time made me just
It
sad.
is strange, isn't it? It's so weird.
Also, you know, the other part of that sadness though is knowing that you're in the minority and that most people think that is what HD means because they're so used to HD TVs.
Isn't that interesting?
That way.
And they don't even see it. Yeah, it's invisible. I find, actually, to be honest with you, that this is like, you know, sound geeks will play things for me that I just can't perceive. I find, as crazy as it sounds, a lot of people cannot observe with their eyes the phenomenon you're talking about.
Well, I think, again, what I, you know, probably move on past that, but the reason why I still think that that's the case is early on, that motion smoothing was how they got away with HD not looking just like crap, right? So when people saw sports, it looked really great. It looked fairly realistic. And so people equated that look, the motion smoothing look, with what HD looked like. They're two separate phenomena, but they were packaged together.
It's a really good point.
So many people just saw it in a store and go, oh, well, I guess that's what HD looks like. That's what a plasma TV looks like. That's what an LCD TV looks like. And no one could really go, no, turn that off. That's terrible. When you watch a movie, it's not supposed to look like video.
Right.
But, I mean, how are you going to argue with your aunt or your uncle or your friend who goes, no, it looks good on sports and it looks like, look how smooth it is. I love that. And you go, oh, please don't. I mean, I've been in I had one friend who was nice enough. I go, hey, I know you're a movie buff. Can I turn your TV to game mode and let you see if there's a difference? I don't want to be that guy, but can I, like, we're good enough friends. Because I'm not going to do that to somebody's TV, like, just be a jerk about it. But this person in particular, I asked them, I go, you're showing me these movies, and because we're good friends and because you're also a film buff, please, can I do this? And they go, oh, wow, yeah, that looks like it fixed it. I'm like, oh, you know, I don't know, man. You know, again, enjoy what you enjoy. It just, this is again, film geekery in the same way that you talk about audio geekery, which, you know, I'm both, and CG geekery. So I'm just triple curse. So again, maybe it's better that you're wig blind about that too.
Yes. People will go, hey, listen to this recording of Freddie Mercury. Listen to this recording, and you'll note that the high highs and the low lows are too close together. There's so much more richness in this version. And I'm like, I wish I understood what you were telling me, but I don't.
I got you. And again, and sometimes you don't want to know. Like I've had things ruined for me. I used to be able to see there was a watermark, copy protection, kind of like, burned into some movies, and there were these orange dots. And I'm so used to looking at things that I would see these orange dots, and I had to look it up because I thought I was going crazy. And it was an actual. They don't use it anymore, but it was for a while how they watermarked some films. Yes. And I found it, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm not insane. But
the one I love is you watch an old movie, and approximately like a minute or so before you got to change reels, a little orange circle.
Well, I don't mind. No, I don't mind. This is different than cigarette burns. Like everybody can see cigarette burns. This was like these orange. I'll send you a link if it's still around. But basically, I kept seeing these things because I'm attuned to that. And dear Lord, I never wish that on anybody because it bugs me. So I hope that most people don't see these things. I think you're better off. Like, ignorance is bliss. We're far off base, and I apologize, but yeah, that's
no worries. No worries. Julia, do you have any final thoughts? Once again, returning to the movie Web of the Spider.
Well, first of all, the name is so stupid. Like, what does that have to do with anything? That's like true. That movie. My favorite example of a movie that has a name that would have been a good name for a different movie is Primal Fear, because I'm always like, there's nothing. It's not it's not fearful, and there's nothing primal about it.
Right.
But it's like somebody went, oh, that'd be a great name for a movie.
Just a generic title. Yeah.
Just stick it on here. But this one is like even more so, where you could.
Do you know what it was called in Germany? This movie, not making this up. It was called Dracula in the Castle of Blood. No, Castle of Fright. It was Dracula in the Castle of Fright. There's no Dracula in this movie, and there is a Castle of Fright, I guess.
It's like somebody goes, "Here's a title. Stick it on whatever the next movie is that you're putting out." And I feel like that's how it happened. So yeah, that's crazy. And then other than that, I mean, we've pretty much gone over. It's pretty much everything Tony said and everything we've all said previously is, you know, that it's just not, it doesn't have the atmospheric magic quality that the other one has, and it doesn't bring anything really new. So no,
Yeah.
I didn't care for it.
The movie also in French was called Phantoms of the Stormwind. It's actually a pretty
Okay.
great name.
That's a cool.
That's a
Yeah.
good name. I don't know if it fits this movie, but damn, I'm a little bit
Yeah.
mad that somebody that sounds cool. It sounds like it should be a Shaw Brothers movie.
I know. It really does. Yes. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. My final thoughts are, you would only watch this movie if you were if you were doing an experiment on your own, or were doing some research on Antonio Margheriti, or were teaching a class on Italian horror and wanted to watch these movies back to back for, as Drew called it, compare contrast. That's the only reason you watch this movie. Otherwise, you watch Castle of Blood. It's a given. With the caveat, the little asterisk, that I also have not seen the German cut. So, you know, if it's a lost color classic that adds more, right now it seems to add such a small percentage of new stuff to the original that there's just no reason to watch this. But you know, I did think that the main character was a decent actor, and there were a couple good bits, like two, the woman standing behind the curtain, and Elizabeth standing behind the curtain and Elizabeth disappearing. Those were good bits. The rest, it's just a retread of the original. Okay, let's get endorsements. I can't wait to hear what you guys want to recommend. We'll go Drew, Tony, Julia, and then I'll go. Drew, what are your endorsements this week?
Well, first off, selfish endorsement, because we're in Christmas time, so I feel like I almost have to yearly.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Go on Comixology and go get the Halloween Man Christmas special, because it's the best $1.99 that you can spend right now. And you know, it came out a year or so back, but Christmas specials are evergreen because they're brand new every December. So please check that out. It's one of the better things that I think I've done, and my estimation of that has not wavered over the years. So that is my suggestion. My non-selfish, completely tied into what we were talking about earlier, endorsement, Dark Corners Reviews, which is a YouTube channel that I really like, that does mostly reviews of horror films, particularly schlocky horror films a lot of the times, but they do occasionally delve into legitimately classic movies once in a while. In fact, they did a great series of videos on the Hammer Frankenstein movies a while back. But they just recently put out a 2-part series. The first one is called The Rise of Dracula, and the second one is called The Return of Dracula. But they're both about Bela Lugosi and how he has become so tied to Dracula and how that affected his career in life, but also the other the Universal Dracula franchise and other people who have played Dracula and how that's kind of affected their performance. And they actually open the first video talking kind of about something that I have been thinking a lot about myself over the last years, and I started to allude to this earlier, how Lugosi has kind of become underrated as Dracula, because I think he is a Dracula that we take for granted because he's the Dracula that everybody copies, or they, you know, if they're trying not to do Lugosi, it's because they're trying to not do Lugosi. But even then, like, you know, you have somebody like Lee who did go into a different direction, he still can't escape the Bela Lugosi costuming. So like it is weird to say that, you know, you now almost have to defend saying, yes, Bela Lugosi is the best Dracula, and, you know, come up with all these reasons. And, you know, I just was happy, you know, for one, these videos, even if you don't agree with me about Bela Lugosi, these videos are interesting, and they're very informative about,
and they're remarkably well produced. I just want to mention, having seen some of them, they're a production that, you know, that these guys are putting in a lot of work. to do those.
Well,
yeah.
and I actually, Bela Lugosi fan that I am, I actually learned something that I didn't ever know, and that Lugosi was the life model for the demon in Night of Bald Mountain, the Night of Bald Mountain sequence in
No, me
Fantasia.
that's interesting.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, and I never knew that. And I am a Bela like as anybody who listens to our Bela Lugosi retrospective will know, I am a Bela Lugosi fanatic. So like I was stunned that there was something I didn't know about the man. So I really recommend this even if you're just like a casual horror fan. I think there's some stuff you'll get out of it, but like I think contextualizing Lugosi, in 2020 is important because we have had all these other Draculas, and some of them are great. Like, look, I really like Christopher Lee. I really like Frank Langella. It's not a knock but it's not a knock on them to say this is where our cinematic idea of what a vampire came from.
It also drives me crazy because when Jason and I, for example, worked on that Kid Monsters game, Monster Force, the fact that the director Universal was bankrolling this game, and the fact that they wouldn't make the character, the Kid Dracula character, take advantage of the iconic version, which is what they own. They don't own Dracula; they own Lugosi's Dracula.
That's right.
And the fact that they just would not do it because kids won't get this or that. They fought against us calling a character Dr. Pretorius because kids won't get it. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You own that. And the people who get it will get it, and they'll think that's a cool nod. But that producer was his own whatever.
Isn't that funny?
The funny thing is though,
it's crazy to
their
me.
Their attitude towards the Lugosi Dracula, that's not a new thing. Like that was even going on even back in the day, whereas they had this amazing, performance like that they could bust out anytime they want, and yet they would hire everybody else to play Dracula, and he would end up going and making.
I think it's because of Lenny Bruce, honestly. I mean, not in the 40s, but Lenny Bruce made that Lugosi just so firmly in people's head because he did his big Lugosi impression, But
the thing is, they had no problems merchandising the hell out of it. I got a ton of Universal Dracula toys when I was working on that game. They had no problems capitalizing on that. But when it came to making a game where they were like, I mean, of course that one was flawed because at the time it never shipped. But because he because he put out Cold Breath, they had Dracula, an immortal who can't get sick, have a cold. So he talked like this the whole time.
No, he talked like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yeah.
It was
which was crazy. Again, not like the fact that they would not only not use Lugosi, this being Universal, but also make him have a cold because he shot Cold Breath in the game was maddening. And I'd spent all this time doing all these animations. I was lead animator on it. But it's nothing. It's like you said, there's nothing new about that, right? But it was frustrating because I wanted to do the game because I was such a huge Universal fan, and to at almost every step of the way be confronted with, we don't want to make it too Universal, was insane to me. I just can't freaking believe it. But it happened.
The best things about this video, I think, is that it points out a lot of the performances that some of which we've talked about on the show, but that Lugosi is legitimately really great in. And if you are a novice classic horror fan, like it kind of points you into a direction, and because if all you know about Lugosi is like the Martin Landau Lugosi from the Ed Wood biopic, that's not legitimately, while it's a great performance on Martin Landau's part, that's not like a legitimate look into the man. And it also kind of gives you the idea that he was a cheesy actor, and he wasn't. And I just was glad to see Bela Lugosi getting some respect in 2020 because I am a fan, obviously, and I do feel like it's weird that he is kind of underrated, because you would think it's sort of like if Sean Connery became the underrated James Bond. You know, you just not something you would ever think about, but and yet it's something that's happened here. And you know, maybe it's because those movies, it's because the horror films that Bela Lugosi was in now seem kind of archaic.
Well, I mean, 1931 is 89 years ago.
Yeah,
so
it's an ancient movie by movie standards. So I guess Gary Oldman feels a little more contemporary.
Still pretty damn old. I mean, if you're a kid today, the Gary Oldman movie came out when you were a very
that
small
came out
child.
that came out when I was a teenager. So
right. So it's luckily we don't have to suffer with people prioritizing the Oldman Dracula either.
That was just the first modern era Dracula that came to
Mental
mind,
note:
I guess.
Did Raul Julia ever play Dracula? And tried to place in my head if he did.
He did
on
stage. He did on
very
stage.
good. Thank you.
Never on film, which is a shame because he would have been.
It would have been
phenomenal.
Fabulous. Oh my God, Raul Julia would have been so good. And Raul Julia died unexpectedly very early. Well, not unexpectedly once he was suffering from cancer, but that was awful. So, all right, Tony. Well, I'm sorry, Drew. Were you done with your endorsements?
That was it. I'm done.
All right, swell though. Okay, very cool. Tony, do you have any endorsements for us?
I'm trying to think. I haven't done a lot of. Mainly, I've just been playing games and hanging out with Rain. We got an early Christmas present of a projector, and that's been really kind of cool. And watching some UHD movies, like it handles 4K. So there's actually there aren't a lot of UHD 4K movies, but it is kind of cool to have that option. Mainly, we got it because who knows when we're going to be able to go to theaters again. So I finally pulled the plug on that. Trying to think. Just because today I've been telling people about this movie ever since I saw it. I'm sure I've mentioned it before, but I was talking to a good friend and saying, hey, you really need to see this movie. And then we were having a back and forth discussion of it on Messenger. So I'm gonna, again, because people may or may not have watched it, and I think it's really great, the movie Heads for Sale, Shaw Brothers movie on Amazon Prime. I was talking to Max, and he rightly made the association with Come Drink With Me, which is another classic. And the heroine in Heads for Sale is amazing. She's super great. It's really beautiful. The print is beautiful. All the Shaw stuff that they restored looks amazing. Not everything is restored that's on Prime, but things that are look fantastic. And so because we were kind of going back and forth on that, I'm gonna just say, if you didn't listen to me the first time or you missed that episode or whatever, I am going to definitely recommend Heads for Sale, which sounds like and when you get to the scene which bears the title, it really goes ham. It's so great. It's such a good scene. But yes, definitely, if you are at all a fan of when I recommend kung fu, martial arts, wuxia, sword play kind of movies, Shaw stuff, definitely Heads for Sale is something that I think people would enjoy. I think the main character is fantastic. She's just really great. Down to everybody's telling her like, oh, you're this cool swordsman, but you should find a man, etc. She goes, I am a great swords person. Like, yeah, I'm great. Why should I have to find a man? I think I'll just keep, cutting fools who need cutting. That's kind of and it's so fantastic. I really enjoy that movie, but since it was brought up again today, I'm gonna recommend that, Heads for Sale.
Love it. Julia, did you have anything to endorse?
We enjoyed watching the Prom, the new movie version of The Prom, which is a musical about a young girl who is gay in Indiana. Right? Is that where the state was? I think it's just a gay in Indiana.
I think that's right.
That is
the
ill-advised.
Meryl Streep movie we saw this weekend, by the way. But go ahead.
Yeah, we saw two. Yeah, what was the other one called?
Let Them All Talk from Steven Soderbergh.
Let Them All Talk. Both of those movies were great. Yeah, I think The Prom is definitely, you have to be a fan of musicals and It's sweet. It's a great cast, and then also Let Them All Talk was really really good. So yeah, I haven't been taking in a whole bunch of new stuff, but those both were interesting. Let Them All Talk also has a great cast. It's Meryl Streep brings her friends Candice Bergen and Diane Wiest on this cruise across the Atlantic Ocean. And yeah, that's a really interesting film too. So both of those are available on streaming. And The Prom is neat if you like musicals and if you are interested in storylines about couples getting to, or people getting to love who they love without being, rather actually this film is about the fact that she doesn't get to love who she loves without being condemned to ridicule and prejudice and all that. But then, of course, is because it's a musical, we've got to have a journey where the town will come around at least part of it. And the realistic part of it is not everybody does. There's a lot of people who are still
it's lovely. It's really lovely, isn't it? All right, I got 2 endorsements. One, which I mentioned last week, we have the podcast book is coming at the end of December. You can order it now. The Castle of Horror podcast book of great horror, our favorites, top 10s, and bizarre pleasures. I am so happy about it, how it came out. We have essays from Julia and Tony, and lots of essays from Drew, several reviews from me, and some transcripts of favorite episodes. And I'm so stoked for people to see it and comment on it. So this is going to be super fun. So check that out. Also, what I've been doing to kill time in the daytime lately is watching a lot of thrillers from the 90s. And the one I watched this week, I'm actually still in the middle of it, but it's a good example. It's called Shattered, where Tom Berenger wakes up after an accident. He has amnesia, and he quickly works out his wife was trying to kill him, but he doesn't remember why. It is an example of, and this is by Wolfgang Petersen, who made Das Boot. It's a great example of what I love about thrillers before the recent blockbuster era. In the 90s and in the 80s, you could have adult mysteries and thrillers with like smallish casts, just sort of, eventually chasing one another around an apartment building with a knife, and and it didn't have to be any bigger than that. And what happened after a while is that blockbusters took over, and so the only reason you go to the movies is to see a giant movie. And so films like this sort of lost their place in the theater, and you can kind of only catch them on VOD. Nothing wrong with that, but what's great about these is they harken back to a time when you could see great thrillers in the theater, and they're all on Prime. Most of them are forgotten, and they're awesome. What was that?
Did you find out because he was a total mansplainer, and she finally had enough? Was that the? I mean,
it's something like that.
Like that would be that would be awesome if you find out like, wow, he was just really a jerk, and that's why she was trying to. That would be amazing.
Apparently they were both jerks. I haven't yet worked out what the twist ending is going to be, because I know it's headed for not where you think it's heading. I just don't know what the hell is going to happen. So I've had such a good time just queuing up thrillers on Prime. It's been fantastic. So that's my endorsement is just get on Prime and look for stuff. But Shattered is what I'm watching right now. And that's it. I hope you guys have a fabulous week, and we'll be back next week with one more Dead Writers Writing, which is not a remake of Castle of Blood. It is going to be the inimitable movie Bird with a Crystal Plumage. I cannot wait to discuss that film. So everybody, be excellent to one another. Come to the Facebook page. We'll talk. I hope you guys have a great time. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.